Something's wrong. Elise didn't look up from the screen, didn't blink, didn't breathe for a full 3 seconds as the audio feed from the surface crackled into static. The video had already gone out. The timer on the side still ticked. Forward like nothing had happened, like everything was still normal. But she could feel it in her chest, in that hollow space behind her ribs where instinct lived. Comms. Confirmed status of Ambassador High. Now, the technician didn't answer right away. His fingers danced over the controls. Breath caught in his throat. Around them, the bridge of the UEN Resolute was dead quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines and the distant whine of cooling systems pushing against the heat of nearby thruster burns. Outside the forward window, the asteroid floated in the dark, the diplomatic platform, smooth and steel gray, marked only with beacon lights and a thin scaffold of scanning equipment. Still no signal. "Ma'am," the comms officer finally said. Voice-tight Elise clenched her jaw and rose from the command chair. "Get me visuals from our drones. Anything. If the Scarvians even scratched him, I want weapons hot." "Ma'am, we have no clearance to." "Don't finish that sentence unless you want to walk home in a suit." She moved to the rail at the front of the bridge, staring out at the black beyond the reinforced glass. Somewhere down there, Jonathan Holloway had walked onto that rock with his hands open, palms bare, trusting that peace meant the same thing to them as it did to him. The diplomatic pod had landed cleanly. The Scarvian delegation had met him on schedule. Then silence, no panic, no warning. Just gone. Elise remembered what he said before boarding. "They won't kill me. Not with every species watching. The Scarvians know better. They want respect, not war." She had almost believed him. The screen blinked. A new feed opened. The external camera mounted on the recovery shuttle was broadcasting again. The pod was returning. "It's early," someone whispered behind her. The docking clamps engaged. The retrieval bay hissed into life. Elise was already moving, boots hitting steel fast, breath steady but burning in her chest. She didn't need to tell anyone to follow. Her second, Ramirez, was already behind her, hand drifting toward his. Sidearm out of reflex. No one said it, but they all felt it. Something inside that pod was wrong. The platform hissed open. Steam vented from the seal. Then the smell hit her. Not machine oil, not ozone blood. Ramirez flinched first. Elise stepped forward, slow, every muscle tense, and looked inside. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared at what used to be Jonathan Holloway. His helmet was shattered, his chest plate crushed inward, the metal folded like paper. One arm was missing below the elbow. The flag on his suit was soaked in his own blood. But his face, the part that wasn't ruined, was calm. Eyes open. Mouth still trying to finish a word he never got to say. Her ears rang. Her mind emptied. The pod's interior light blinked, casting red across the broken pieces of the man who had come in peace. Behind her, someone threw up. Another started sobbing quietly. Elise didn't move. "Seal the deck," she said, voice level. "Quarantine protocols." Ramirez stepped forward. "Commander, we should alert Central Command before we..." "No," she said, turning slowly. Eyes locked on nothing. "Everything? Send a message to the fleet. One line. Use Priority 1 encryption." She paused. "Ambassador Hall has been murdered. Diplomatic mission terminated. Authorization for total war confirmed." Silence followed. No one asked if she had the authority. No one questioned the words. Ramirez nodded once and turned to the console. Elise stayed by the pod, her hand resting on its edge, like she could somehow pull him back up just by holding on. But there was no coming back from this, and whoever did, this was going to learn what the rest of the galaxy had already figured out the hard way: humans were slow to anger. Yes, but once you lit the fire, they would burn your stars down to ash. The fleet hit the edge of Scarvian space, Like a thunderclap wrapped in metal and rage, 3 days after Hale's body came back in pieces, Earth's first wave moved in. 37 ships in formation, the Resolute at the center, cutting a path. Through the darkness, like a spear, aimed straight at the Scarvian throat. There were no more peace talks. No terms, no translators. Just warheads, ion disruptors, and kinetic lances screaming through vacuum. Elise stood in the war room, watching a live feed of the battle unfold in fractured windows. Every detonation across the grid made the lights flicker against her face. Scarvian patrol frigates crumbled under the first barrage. Their hulls weren't built for this kind of violence. No one's were. Not when humanity stopped holding back. They're scrambling fighters from the moon base. Sector 6, Ramirez said, voice steady but quiet. He had that look again, the one he got when things were going too fast, and he had to pretend they, Ware and Tullis, didn't look at him. Route all fire from the Harrow and Gentry to intercept. Full spread. No survivors. He hesitated just a beat too long. Elise, we've already cleared the orbital defenses. That base is exposed. If we hit it with everything, there won't be anyone left alive. That's the idea, she said without blinking. He didn't argue again. He just nodded and passed the order. Another window on the feed turned white with the impact. The base didn't explode. It folded, collapsed inward like it had been sucked into itself. A ripple of light and dust across the cold void. Elise closed her eyes for half a second, just long enough to feel the echo of it in her bones. They weren't supposed to be here. She had spent most of her career advocating for restraint, believing in law, structure, diplomacy. She had stood behind Jonathan Holley too many times to count, backing his negotiations even when they cost lives, because he was usually right. But not this time. This time, peace had gotten him butchered. This time, they burned. They comes alert flashed on the central display. An incoming transmission from the rear fleet. Admiral Kwan's voice, sharp and clipped as always, came through with just enough clarity to cut straight to the bone. We've secured the outer system. No major resistance remaining. Civilian colonies have either evacuated or gone to ground. Requesting final clearance to glass the primary production ring, Elise stared at the display. The Scarvian ring world below looked like a ribbon wrapped around a dead sun, its solar panels still rotating, still soaking in light for factories that would never run again. Her mouth was dry as she thought of the civilians, the Scarvian workers, the engineers, families, teachers, people who never touched a weapon, but now stood beneath crosshairs they couldn't even see. Jonathan would have stopped her, but Jonathan was gone. Clearance granted, she said. The sky lit up for minutes. The ring fractured in silence, slow and catastrophic, pieces peeling away like molten petals drifting into space. One by one, the power cores went critical. The feeds overloaded. Then everything went dark back on the Resolute. The bridge crew said nothing. Even the younger officers, who once cheered during early strikes, now watched with quiet eyes. Not horror exactly, just something heavier. Ramirez leaned toward her. We just wiped out 100,000, maybe more. You really think this ends with them surrendering? No, Elise said, turning toward the viewport. I think it ends when they don't have anything left to fight with. Behind her, another comms message buzzed. A scrambled signal, unmarked. The encryption had Earth military protocols, but with slight distortions. Ramirez checked the readout, frowning. That's odd. It's coming from inside Scarvian territory. Looks like a human sub-channel. Elise raised an eyebrow, put it through. The screen flickered. A single line of text appeared on screen. No voice, no visuals. You were never supposed to find out. Her heart kicked once, hard and fast. Trace it, she said, already trying. It's bouncing off 3 satellites, We thought we're dead. Someone knew how to cover their tracks. Elise stared at the words. Her thoughts churned in the quiet space beneath her ribs. Hale's death, the sudden silence, the clean, precise brutality of it all. The Scarvians didn't hide from war. But they didn't start it like this. Either a cold suspicion crept in this. Wasn't just a murder, this was a setup, and someone, maybe someone human, wanted it to keep burning. Keep the trace running, she said, stepping away from the screen. Find out who the hell sent that message before this whole war spirals. Out of our hands, because if there was more to Hale's death than they knew, then this firestorm they were leading might be someone else's design. The bunker was built into the bones of a dying planet from orbit. It looked like nothing. Just rust-colored mountains, scorched valleys, and fractured crust splitting open where the core no longer pulsed. A graveyard world, long stripped of value. But deep beneath the cracked stone, behind heat shielding and electromagnetic shrouds, was a command center the Scarvians never meant for outsiders to find, and now Elise was standing inside it. Helmet tucked under one arm, her boots leaving streaks of red dust across ancient tile. The Scarvian in front of her didn't bow. It didn't hiss, didn't spit, didn't even blink in that slow, unnerving way they usually did. It just watched her with those dark, layered eyes. No hatred, no fear. Just tired resolve. You are late, it said. Elise didn't bother answering. That, she looked around the room instead. There were maybe a dozen Scarvians here, all unarmed, all armored, but clearly old, wounded, or ragged. Not soldiers, not government. Something else. Are you the ones who tried to stop the execution? She asked, eyes locked on the one in front. Yes, the creature replied. And we failed. Your diplomat never should have been sent alone. We warned him. We warned your council. No one listened. You sent a warning? To your intelligence agency. 12 days before he arrived, Ramirez stepped forward from behind Elise, face pale. That transmission never made it to us. No, the Scarvian said. It was intercepted. By one of your own. Elise felt the chill behind those words, like the sudden drop of air pressure in a sealed room. Her stomach turned, not from fear, but recognition. A puzzle piece locking into place. Someone had been moving parts on both sides, and Jonathan had been a sacrificial pawn. Your resistance? She asked, voice low. We were military once. Officers, strategists, some even. Politicians. Then the warden took control. The warden? The Scarvian gave what passed for a nod. An extremist, charismatic, violent, unified the military under a new doctrine, purged moderates, took over the diplomatic corps, ordered your ambassador's death, and we walked right into it. Ramirez muttered. Elise turned away from the alien, pressing her hand against the cold metal wall. She wanted to scream, to hit something, but the weight of it pressed her. Still, the war wasn't righteous. It wasn't even just a retaliation anymore. It was a trap, and she had helped pull the trigger. The Scarvian moved closer. This warden is using your retaliation to solidify power. The more worlds you burn, the more their people rally to him. Every dead Scarvian becomes another soldier in his army. He wants you to keep going, to make peace impossible. And who sent the message? She asked. The one that said we were never supposed to find out. We did, the creature said. But we didn't expect you to trace it back here. That was a mistake. Or perhaps a necessary one. There was silence between them. The kind that felt like something tipping. Elise looked at Ramirez. We need to get this intel back to command. He hesitated. You think they'll believe it? They're still glassing cities on the outer rim. We just authorized an orbital. Decapitation strike 6 hours ago. They'll believe it if I bring it myself, assuming we make it out of here. Right on cue, the perimeter alarm lit red. A mechanical voice buzzed across the bunker ceiling. The Scarvian looked up, hissing something in their native tongue. "Your presence was detected," it said. "The Warden's agents are coming. They know someone betrayed them." "How long?" "Do we have?" "Not long." The corridor shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ground rumbled again, heavier now. Not seismic activity. Landers, boots, weapons charging. Ramirez drew his sidearm and shoved it into Elise's hands. "You're not dying down here? Not with this intel." "Go," she started to argue. He cut her off with a look. "We lose this, everything burns? We lose this, Halle died for nothing." She ran down the back tunnel, through a collapsed chamber, out into the open red wastes of the dead world. A shuttle was already warming up, hidden under camouflage netting. Barely space-worthy, but it would have to do. She climbed in, system sputtering, atmosphere leaking in a low hiss as she keyed and launched behind her. The bunker shook again. She didn't look back. She broke orbit through flak and chaos, punching the thrusters past red line. One shot clipped the wing. Lights screamed. She didn't stop climbing, not until she was clear, and the stars broke open above her, like scattered glass. And far below, someone was still holding the line, when the stars finally settled and her nav. System stabilized, she saw it. A ping from an Earth-listening post near the outer colonies. She keyed the emergency channel and uploaded everything. Every file, every voice recording, every truth they'd nearly buried under fire and rage. When the message finished sending, Elise slumped in the pilot seat, bruised, burned, and bloodied. But alive and with her, the last real chance to stop the war before it ate the galaxy whole. Asked ChatGPT. They brought her straight into the vault room beneath the Terran Assembly building, without a word, no press, no ceremony. No warm reunion, just a cold steel hallway, silent escorts in black armor, and a data drive in Elise's hand that could burn. Down everything they thought they were fighting for. Prime Delegate was already waiting inside, gray suit, steel eyes, voice smooth as oil, but sharp enough to cut through stone. He watched Elise like someone measuring the weight of a weapon before deciding whether to use it or bury it. "You've been off-grid for 6 days. Your fleet is in chaos." The 7th Carrier Division disobeyed a retreat order yesterday and got wiped out in the Eros Rift. So before we play any recordings, I want to know what you think you're doing here. Commander Rowe, Elise placed the data drive on the table without sitting down. "I'm here to stop us from finishing with someone else." Started, there was silence. She watched his eyes flicker once toward the drive. "You're saying the Scarvians didn't murder our diplomat. I'm saying someone wanted it to look that way. Someone who knew Earth's first instinct wouldn't be to ask questions. Someone with access to both sides." Another voice broke in. "Admiral Nezra, head of Earth's Orbital Defense Network. That's a bold accusation. You're claiming a joint operation between a rogue Scarvian faction and an internal human traitor?" "I'm not claiming it," Elise said. "I brought proof." She tapped the drive. The projection lit the air. Scrambled Scarvian logs, intercepted transmissions, decrypted code bursts tied to a company seal that shouldn't have been anywhere. Near the negotiation logs, one name blinked red across the top of every frame. VREX Systems GROP, largest weapons manufacturer in the Western conglomerate. Suppliers of nearly 40% of Earth's Navy. Investors in reconstruction contracts. Contractors for every system Earth would need to rebuild what it had just finished destroying. A hush settled over the room like falling snow. Nezra leaned forward slowly. "You're saying Varex orchestrated the ambassador's death to ignite a war they could profit from?" Elise didn't answer. The recording did it for her. A voice came through the speaker. Human, confident, cold. "Once the envoy is dead, Earth will have no choice. The Scarvians will respond like animals. That's what the board needs. Chaos, demand, Endless production. You keep your warden. We keep our contracts. Everyone wins. The projection went dark now. One moved for a long time finally, the prime delegate. Exhaled and leaned back. Why now? Why come to us instead of leaking this publicly? Because if I did that, Elise said, the people would riot. The fleets would fracture. And we'd lose what little control we have left. I don't want revenge. I want accountability. The right way. And you trust us to handle it quietly? She looked him in the eye, hard and unblinking. No. Trust that if you don't, I'll make sure everyone on Earth hears this in 6 hours. He didn't smile. But something behind his eyes changed. Orders were given. Investigations launched. Arrests began. Half of Varex's board fled off-world within the hour. The rest were detained. Frozen assets. Security raids. Emergency hearings. And for the first time in months, the bloodied gears of Earth's war machine ground to a halt. But the damage had already spread 2 days later. Elise was back aboard the Resolute. The crew looked different now. Thinner, quieter. The jokes were gone. The swagger had vanished. These weren't the same people who cheered in the launch bay. When they first went to war, they'd seen too much, and too many of them weren't coming back. Ramirez met her in the command deck. His shoulder was bandaged, his uniform torn at the collar. But he smiled when he saw her, just enough to remind her they were still human underneath it all. Orders came through, he said. Fleet is standing down. We're pulling out of Scarvian space. Ceasefire has been acknowledged on both sides. Scarvian resistance is flushing out what's left of the Warden's loyalists. And our prisoners? Elise asked, cooperative. Turns out being on the losing side of a setup doesn't feel great. Even when you're the muscle. She looked out at the stars again. They didn't feel like a victory. Just another breath, bought with too much blood. A soft chime echoed from the fill. Main console. A message blinked on the screen, encrypted. Direct line from the Scarvian, rebel leader she'd worked with underground. We are cleaning our house, but trust will take longer to rebuild. If your kind seeks peace, make sure next time your weapons stay home. She read the message twice. Then she turned to Ramirez. Get me a secure channel. I want to talk to the Scarvian Council. Direct. No diplomats. No liaisons. Just people. He raised an eyebrow. Starting peace talks already? No, Elise said, stepping toward the console. I'm making sure the next one doesn't start. With someone dying alone on a rock for nothing. And with that, she opened the line. The hull of the Vesper groaned as it pierced into low orbit, atmospheric friction painting the shielded cockpit glass in a glow of dull orange. Inside, the silence between Ward and Kira was heavy, not from discomfort, but from the weight of what they were about to do. Earth Command had sent them with clear parameters: secure, extract, retaliate, but there was an unspoken understanding now. This was no longer a diplomatic failure. It was personal, and every soldier on the fleet knew it. 3 ships on approach, Kira muttered, fingers dancing across her console as red triangles swarmed into view on the radar. Cloaked, but they've just powered up. They want to play chicken. Ward leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Weapons cold. We don't fire unless fired upon. Let them make the first mistake. Kira didn't respond right away. Her jaw tightened as she stared at the incoming blips. You really think they're after negotiation this time? He shook his head, slow and certain. No, but Command wants optics. If we fire first, we give them another excuse to twist the narrative. The Vesper shuddered as the 3 enemy ships fell into a V formation, a classic intimidation pattern. Their designs were sharp, metallic things, almost like arrowheads with bodies that shimmered in the dark, like oil over water. No markings, no ID signatures. Just ghosts with teeth. They're hailing us, Kira said, voice clipped. Encrypted, but I've seen this frequency before. Mediator protocol. Ward's eyebrows rose. Then let's hear it. A moment of static, and a voice crackled through the comms, distorted but unmistakably human. Stand down, Earth vessel. You have violated contested airspace. Any further movement will be considered an act of war. Kira blinked, her face hardening. That's Dren's voice. Ward stared at her, then back at the comm speaker. No, that's not possible. He was dead before they even called for evac. Another burst of static, and again the same voice, eerily calm. Repeat. Stand down or be eliminated. This is your final warning. Kira's hands trembled slightly on the console. That's a clone, or a synthetic. They used his voice to screw with us. Ward nodded, slowly straightening in his seat. They didn't just kill him. They're parading his voice like a trophy. The silence that followed didn't need. Translation. The enemy had made their move, not with weapons, but with something far more calculated. They wanted Earth to feel powerless, to question every signal, every voice, new orders. Kira asked Ward reached for the override switch, flipping it open with a decisive click. Yeah, override Article 4. Bring shields up, prep EMP scatter. And Kira. She glanced over, her face pale but steady. We're not waiting for them to make another move.